The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2. That's right, once again, this is the Harry Potter formula. Every single finale to a young adult series of novels, it gets the Harry Potter treatment. The last novel gets split up into 2 parts, and spoiler alert, just like Mockingjay Part 1, yes, the pacing of Mockingjay Part 2 is what hurts this. But, of course, I'm here to give this movie credit where it's due. This is the superior entry of the Mockingjays, at least in my opinion, because I am an action fanatic. I love watching big, gigantic action sequences. I like war movies, and that's what Mockingjay Part 2 is deep down. So realizing the stakes are no longer just for survival, Katniss teams up with her closest friends, including Peeta, Gale, and Finnick for the ultimate mission. As an army, they leave District 13 to liberate the citizens of war-torn Panem and assassinate President Snow. President Snow, in the meantime, is obsessed with destroying Katniss. What lies ahead are mortal traps, dangerous enemies, and moral choices that will ultimately determine the future of millions. Or as Finnick Odair likes to say, welcome to the 76th Hunger Games. God, is Suzanne Collins also into poetry? Because that line right there and a good chunk of this dialogue, sheer poetry. And we'll get into that as this goes on. And I will warn you, this does contain some spoilers, this video, so be forewarned in case you've never seen either Mockingjay movie. If you've never seen any Hunger Games movie, never read any of the books, you've been fairly warned. Now, again, Francis Lawrence proves himself such a capable director. Ever since he stepped foot in this series doing Catching Fire, like, this was the right guy for the role the entire time. And Mockingjay Part 2 is very much akin to the best entry in the entire series, Catching Fire, because you get so much freaking action. Part 2 is making up where Part 1 did not have any action whatsoever. Part 1 was very much psychological warfare, you know, with the Capitol and the rebels trading off propaganda videos, slandering each other. This one gets into the physical warfare. This is where the body count starts to go up. This is where the blood starts to spill. This is where booby traps are being set up by the gamekeepers in the Capitol itself as the rebels infiltrate the Capitol itself. And that was a really interesting facet of this movie. As this army lays the Capitol under siege, you actually get to see inside some of the Capitol residents' houses. And it's really interesting, this production design. Just seeing the stark contrast between the houses of the people who lived in the Capitol, the houses of the people who lived in District 12 that you saw in the first movie. Like, it is night and day. Like, all the technicals of this since Catching Fire has been the constant. But from the beginning, the one constant of this series that has never wavered, Jennifer Lawrence is Katniss Everdeen. She is once again so incredibly real in Part 2. And the thing is, it's almost like, again, I hate to make comparisons, it definitely reminds me of how towards the end of the Harry Potter series, like around Half-Blood Prince, Daniel Radcliffe was definitely playing that lead character like, yeah, okay, I get it. This life sucks. Any other proof you want to throw on me? Jennifer Lawrence is very much the same in this movie. Very calm, very reserved emotionally, but it oddly works for this character who has been through the emotional ringer and back. And it's not like she necessarily wanted to be a part of the revolution or be the symbol, the Mockingjay. She was kind of put into that situation from the very beginning when she volunteered for her sister in the 74th games. And just to see how all these characters have evolved since the start. The fact that Peeta was just this nice, earnest baker's apprentice, and he starts off this movie as an unhinged maniac who has been brainwashed by the Capitol injecting Tracker Jacker venom into his veins. And the fact that once the rebels actually do take Peeta back, he could snap at any moment. Like, again, Josh Hutcherson has some really juicy character work, especially towards the beginning of this movie. But of course, you have to get the sappy love triangle thrown into the mix. You do have to throw Gale in there and be like, yeah, I don't have any problems killing you, buddy. And again, that was my big weakness with Catching Fire, was the sappy romance stuff, similar to Twilight. It didn't shred so much on the horribleness of the Twilight series, but I mean, yeah. I definitely very much appreciate that the emotional stakes of this movie have been raised. This is the finale ultimo, after all. There is so much that hangs in the balance in regards to Panem's future, and you feel it throughout this runtime. All these obstacles that are being thrown at our heroes just seem so insurmountable to overcome, and the obstacles do lead to some pretty exciting sequences, one of which involves these mutts in a sewer, like these undead zombie creatures. Almost looks like something out of The Last of Us looking at those things, like, ew. And these things end up eating Finnick Odair alive, and yeah, when this movie came out right after high school graduation, All the people I did theater with, I'm sure, were so sad to see that happen because everybody loved Finnick. I just saw a valiant hero sacrificing himself for what was right, sacrificing himself for the love of his life, who you see marry towards the beginning of the film, sacrifice himself for the unborn child that Annie is carrying. Man, Finnick was such a cool character. And yeah, speaking of the body count, you feel that in this movie. And when the rebels start to infiltrate the president's mansion, the White House, if you will, bombs are dropped and there is a delayed explosion that did not go off at the right time. And this killed off Katniss's little sister Prim. I can do it. Now look, when Prim was killed off, even reading the books, I had a bunch of friends who were reading the book with me, and they just decided to stop reading it once Prim died. Like, that takes all the purpose out of Katniss's character. She was the reason that Katniss volunteered for the games in the first place. And yeah, even though I was gutted to hear Prim go, and I was so sad to read that Prim died, like, why were people in such an uproar about that? But they were not in an uproar when people like, I don't know, Fred Weasley died? Why were they not in an uproar when like Dumbledore died or Snape died? All these beloved characters in the Harry Potter series. Why do these readers not boycott the rest of the series when a beloved character was killed off before the finale? I mean, at least Suzanne Collins wrote it in such a way that I just could not put the book down until I finished it. But anyway, Prim's death and the whole arc surrounding Prim's death with Katniss coming home to an empty house at the end of everything, and you see Prim's cats that Katniss absolutely despised throughout this entire series. And she is on the verge of tears just throwing things at this cat. And the look that this little kitty gives Katniss is just the saddest freaking thing. I mean, as a cat lover, I felt for that thing and I wanted to pick it up and hug it too. But in any case, in addition to all the great action in part 2, you also get some remnants of the political discussions that made part 1 so great. Case in point, the discussion that Katniss has with a very frail President Snow. And once again, Donald Sutherland, like, he's one of my favorite performers in this series. And I said in an earlier video, Donald Sutherland was already a legend going into playing President Snow. But this guy has such a great understanding of this character. And this guy has such a great gift of storytelling and persuasion. Because he basically says something super poetic and poignant to Katniss. Yeah, I'm not above killing children, which is a horrible thing to say. He basically calls the bombing in front of his house wasteful. Because he's right, Prim's death did not need to happen. And who's to blame for that? President Coin and Gale. And this leads to two very pivotal things. One is the absolute downfall and destruction of Katniss's friendship with Gale. Because Gale, being the real piece of work that he is, yeah, really good choice in your early life, Katniss. Gale did not go and visit her in the hospital after Prim died, because that guy knew that he was in on that plan to drop those bombs in front of the president's house, and it basically flies in the face of his promise to Katniss to protect her family. Prim didn't feel very protected, Gale. And the second thing is the execution of President Snow. Now, I was really curious to see how Francis Lawrence was going to do this scene when the movie first came out. And let's just say that I was not disappointed. Because it really does feel like a perfect blend of old-time Roman-style storytelling mixed in with the tumultuous politics of our country as it sits right now. Two different ideologies. President Snow sitting at the stake, getting ready to be shot. But President Snow was going to die anyway because this guy was coughing up blood when he was talking to Katniss. So she decides to shoot President Coin on the pedestal instead because she realizes Coin is just as cruel and as vindictive as Snow is. The straw that broke the camel's back is Coin actually proposing that there is a final Hunger Games in lieu of all the deaths preceding it in the 75 years. And all the living victors are sitting around the table like, what the hell is this? Like, this is not productive. This is not how we fix our country. So Katniss literally kills two birds with one stone. She points her bow at Snow. She shoots Coin instead. Coin falls off the pedestal. The rebels trample Snow anyway. It is a fantastic conclusion. And the whole denouement, just seeing how everything played out, that scene I talked about with Prim's cat that almost, like, literally, I'm not joking, you guys, I swear to God, it actually almost made me burst into tears when she picked up that cat and hugged it, like, oh! But then you have PETA coming home. Him, Katniss, and Haymitch are watching the inauguration of Pan Am's newest president. And then you get the King's Cross sort of scene at the end, which shows Katniss and PETA with 2 children. Katniss looks down at her little infant and says there are much worse games to play. Again, vintage Suzanne Collins, sheer poetry. You could not have ended this series with a better line than that. And that is about it, guys. I mean, Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2, I definitely think is a stronger movie and more rewatchable than Part 1. But again, I gotta reiterate, you should have done Mockingjay as one movie. And why do I say that? Because in 2014, if you put out Mockingjay just as this one big gigantic finale, people would have been so hyped to see that, and people would have churned out so much money at the box office out of their wallets just to go and see how this series ended. But by this point, November of 2015, right before Thanksgiving, nobody really cared about the Hunger Games anymore. Because predictably, Part 2 was unfortunately a financial flop. And I got 3 words as to why it was a financial flop. The Force Awakens. Like, whose genius idea was it to put the finale of the Hunger Games a month before Star Wars returned to theaters? If you need any more indication as to why Mockingjay Part 2 was a financial flop, look no further. Still one of the highest grossing movies of all time, I believe. But yeah, all things considered, disregarding when it came out, it's still a very solid movie, and a very fitting end to this main Hunger Games series. I'm gonna give Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2 a B, which those of you keeping score at home is the same score I gave Part 1. I guarantee you if Mockingjay was one movie, that grade would have been elevated so much higher. Let me know what you thought of Mockingjay Part 2 down in the comments. What was your favorite entry of this series? Because I love discussing all new things in movies and entertainment on the regular. Getting to do so with all of you lovely viewers makes things all the more fun. So do consider subscribing, tap on that thumbs up as well. That would be a huge help, guys. And we have wrapped up the main Hunger Games series, guys, but we have one more to go in this playlist. We're going to be looking at the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes before you know it. I can't freaking wait. Y'all are the best. Thank you so much again for tuning in. And with all that being said, Back Talk, commence.